Hello world. My first stream on YouTube. What I wanted to do was start like building in public and live streaming some of the stuff that I build. I built quite a few products over the last couple of years. The latest one that I wanted to do was building a site analytics application. My blog currently uses Google Analytics, but I want to change that, and I'm also curious and excited about building things. So I found something online called Plausible Analytics, so shout out to Plausible. I'm not trying to rip off your idea. I'm really just trying to build something more or less in the same space. I'm not going to like look at how they operate or anything and back engineer, but I think they're a cool model. They are open source, and I don't know if I'll be able to find the GitHub, but there you go. They're open source, but they offer a hosted version as well. They're obviously very popular. The one big issue, it's not really an issue, but the one thing that makes me not want to go with Plausible is I started looking around, and it looks like everything is hosted using Docker, which means that I would need to use something like Fargate, and I don't want to say averse necessarily, but I would rather go with serverless options, like fully serverless, like Lambda functions and DynamoDB, over having infrastructure that just sits like Fargate would be and like RDS. It definitely has its space, but the projects that I'm building, they don't have very many users, and I would get the same, if not more, benefits, definitely cost benefits and potentially performance benefits by using something like Lambda and DynamoDB over less serverless and more maintained, just kind of like static infrastructure like Fargate and RDS would be. So that's the one main reason that I decided to not go with Plausible Analytics, but I still wanted to transition off of Google Analytics and onto some other analytics application or workload. So I've got crazy allergies, so I apologize to anyone who's watching this and has to deal with hearing me sniffle and sneeze. So Google Analytics, on top of it being Google, despite me streaming on YouTube, Google uses a lot of user data, and there were accusations and findings that Google Analytics broke GDPR, and there was something else in Austria that's similar to GDPR. Basically means that they were exporting user data outside of the EU, which is against their laws. So I think France banned it on like a couple sites or something. There were some reasons why they did it. So I know my blog's read in Europe, I wanted to get off of analytics, and I also thought it would be, I've built sites before, I've built applications and workloads and some like NPM packages and whatnot, so I thought it would be a fun chance to build something new, and since I'm making it open source and I'm trying to be more like build in public-y, hopefully I can share this journey of what I go through to build an application and what it might look like for other people. So I'll start at the bottom just to introduce me and my products. I started off building Elsewhere. Elsewhere was made because my girlfriend and I like to plan trips in a lot of detail, and a lot of times that includes Google Maps and Excel sheets and other random notes. I have an alarm want to go check something. And this was a way to try to attempt to bring all of that together. This was using Next.js. I'd never used Next.js before. It relies heavily on Next.js API, which is not that great. They're a little slow, and it also uses Google Maps. So all of these pins are they're all placed independently. They're all stored in MongoDB. All of this stuff can be updated. It has other people's names. You can add people to maps to collaborate and stuff like that. So that was my first application. It's just a blog. Then I actually made apps. I made an iOS app and an Android app. Let me see if I have it on my phone. So the Android app, I'll turn on my brightness and show it to the screen. The Android app looks like that. You pick a noise, so you can have it's a Pomodoro timer, but whenever you're supposed to be focusing, it plays pink noise, brown noise, or white noise, and it keeps track of Pomodoro timer for you. So it was just kind of like a spin on what Pomodoro could be, and I noticed a lack of using brown noise. I like brown noise better than white noise, so I wanted to give options of other colored noises. Then I got really into Vim at one point in time, and I made a theme for it. Looks like that, and it's completely vanilla, so you don't need to install any extra plugins or anything. Then I have, this is potentially my most popular project. It's a collection of Cloudformation templates. I'm real big into AWS, and I've done a lot of infrastructure as code. So each one of these folders has different templates for CloudFormation. It gets a decent amount of traffic and attention. I have Authentication, which is what I will probably use if I end up creating a version of the site analytics, like a hosted version. It's an authentication service. And I made Papyrus. Papyrus is like QR code menus. So you, let's see, I think I still have an account. And this one was using Crow as well. So all this authentication is through Crow, and it's in Next.js. Crow's completely serverless, so all of its APIs are in Lambda functions. So you'll see some cold start, but so here's the dinner menu. There's your QR code, and you can update it. The QR code stays the same, but you can update stuff, and then you have group IDs. And if you go to the actual site, these are just phony PDFs that I have, but you can see it would be like an actual menu. So that was Papyrus. And then my last one that I made that I've blogged about was the Calendar API. And this one was, I haven't saw me open. You can create calendars, create events, update events, do anything you would think you could do with a calendar. And I made it into an API, and I knew from the start I wanted to put it on Rapid API because there aren't any calendar APIs on Rapid API. I think when most people think of calendar APIs, they think of Google calendars. So I wanted to create an alternative to that, also completely serverless. So hosting cost me $0, which is always nice. Sorry about that. Like I said, my allergies are pretty bad. So yeah, this one is going to be a site analytics application, and I haven't done anything for it, and that was completely on purpose because I wanted it to all be online. I wanted to build it completely in public, so now I'll just call it site analytics. Make it public. This is going to be a CDK application, so I'm going to leave this blank. Create it. So for anyone who doesn't know, CDK is Amazon AWS, or Amazon AWS. It's AWS's infrastructure as code, where you actually write code. So I showed that Cloudformation reference repository project earlier. This is very similar, but you write code and then you pretty much transpile the code into those Cloudformation templates. So the amount of code that you need is significantly less, or the amount of like lines you need is significantly less, and then it generates all the lines of YAML. So with this, I'm going to be using two packages that I have built, two constructs I've built. There's Crow API, and then for testing, I'm going to use CDK Pigeon. And CDK Pigeon was just supposed to be like a funny little meme of a package, but it actually turned out to be pretty useful. It's pretty new. I made it like last week. I made it in literally less than 24 hours. AWS has something called Synthetics Canary, but it costs a ton of money. And it seemed to be the exact same thing. It's just a lambda on a cron. So I made a lambda on a cron, called it Pigeon. It's just a stupid thing. So Crow API is a lot bigger, and it was definitely a thing. It's like Next.js for serverless APIs. So what you can do with it is they upgrade it so often. Update it, sorry, so often. So you can write here. Let's see. This was the calendar API was a Crow application. So here I have my API stack, and then inside that stack I import Crow, and then create an API off of it. And then in here you can see this is how I define. So I have like V1 calendars, and then you can post a calendar, then you can list calendar ID, delete events, and then within events you have event ID, and then you can, well, I needed that because some of them, I made some of the endpoints just direct integrations, just service proxy integrations with like DynamoDB or SNS. So some of those endpoints are, they're not actually defined using code, but that's the idea of what Crow is. And then there are special directories, authorizer and share. So this is the custom Lambda authorizer, and this gets created into a Lambda layer, which is then used with all of the other Lambda functions in these endpoints. So they all have access to this shared, right, like database stuff and all the other utilities that I use. So that is Crow. I'm going to go ahead and open up Site Analytics. So I have no idea how this is actually going to go. I've never streamed like this before. I've never written code like this before, so apologies if I'm not very interactive or anything, or if I go quiet for a while. Like I said, I've never done it before, so. Before I get too deep into the weeds on this, I did want to go through design. I haven't designed this on purpose. But I wanted to do it, again, I wanted to do everything online and build it in public. So I think it would only be fair to also kind of design it out and architect it. For the architecture, it's probably just going to be Lambda and DynamoDB. I'll have to figure out exactly how I want to do like authentication, because I want to be able to make this multi-tenant in case it's like a hosted thing, and then I also want, right, like let's say someone wants to spin up their instance of it, they should be able to let's see, how do I want to do that if they're not like logging in or anything, if it's like a self-hosted, because I don't want to necessarily make them log in if it's their own. Let's see. I wonder how plausible does it. With Google, you sign it with like your Google account, right? So you're authenticated from there. I could have it like host its own authorization, or I could just make it public, like default to public, and then if you decide to like self-host it, you don't have to go through authentication. But if you do, then you would need to pass it a valid JWT. And if that was the case, then you would need valid JWKS or public certificate. So if someone wanted to self-host it with authentication, it would just take them a lot longer to get it set up, because I'd also need like an authentication server or service. Okay, I'll start writing that down. Let's see, we could still do authorization, but that can probably be handled within the application. So the JWT comes in, and then the application will have like, it'll maintain its own list of users that are allowed to access certain resources, like certain sites. It can have that on its own. So, oops. Right, because I have to think about this from a way. I want this to be easy to self-host. Like I want people to be able to come in here, spin it up on their own, and use it without incurring costs, minimal costs. So I want that to be available to everyone. So if they have a JWT server, then they should be able to use that. But so maybe I have a configuration file at like the top level that gets read in by the CDK application and by probably by the Lambda functions, depending on how everything is situated, and then that configuration file will that'll say whether or not like authentication is enabled, maybe like email alerts or an email snapshot, because that's one thing that I find with Google Analytics specifically. When I go to Google Analytics, all I really care about is what does that graph look like over the week, and what were my numbers yesterday. That's pretty much all I care about. So if that was emailed to me at midnight for the following day or for the preceding day, then I would never have to go to Google Analytics. So I'll go ahead and start writing that down. So what I'm thinking for this, SNS has a way to subscribe email addresses, so you can just like send out an alert, and SNS will send it out to email addresses. That way I don't have to work with SES or anything like that. I might end up working with SES, but depending on if SNS can send images. I don't know if it can, or if it can just send text, but either way, what I'm thinking here is it's like a Boolean, send email snapshot. If that's true, then you can pass in a list of emails, and then in that list, the construct will loop through that list and create a subscription for each email address. But when that happens, there's a whole flow with SNS. It'll create the resource and then send each email address an email, and you have to go into that email address and click accept. It doesn't just like spam emails, so that could be an option. Back to authentication, though, my mind kind of, whenever I start like designing something, my mind always goes kind of crazy with all the different options and kind of bounces off the wall. So sorry if it's difficult to follow. So the way that, I guess for anyone who doesn't know about Lambda authorizers and how they work with JWTs, and how JWT validation works, I have a, let me see, I have a blog post about this. Here we go. So in here, when you're verifying a JWT, there are a couple things you need. You need the URL of JWKS, so for crow auth, that's what it looks like. We can actually go there. So anyone in the future who, for some reason, comes back here and wants to use this as like a guide for how I'm thinking about setting this up, it's we go to raw. This is what a JWKS looks like. So we have an array of keys. Normally it's just one element long. There's a use, which is signature. That means this is the public key for a certificate that was used to sign JWTs. Algorithms. I think that's the actual value. I don't remember what that is. This is a random ID. Just identify what the key is. Again, the algorithm, and then key operations is verify. That's just like what the key. That's just like there are a couple of different values that could be in there, but I've been talking with my mic on mute. Whoops. Well, hopefully you've been able to kind of follow along. What I was saying earlier was, sorry if I jump around. I kind of went through the whole email thing. I forget if I was unmuted when I was talking about all that. But it's, yeah, the email thing. I wanted to allow that, but then after that I said, sorry if I'm jumping around too much. When I start like designing things, everything kind of goes haywire in my head. So I started off with the entrance point to the API, and I ended with some like random went to like this email stuff, which is a result of all of this, and then jump back over to authentication. So what I was saying was I want it to be JWT based. That's best for like serverless options, in my opinion, because we won't need a database to maintain sessions, maintain state, any of that. So what you'll need for verifying a JWT, I have a blog post out about it, which I went to. And when it comes to verifying JWTs, what you'll need is something like this. Is a JWK, that's a JSON web key. I don't know. It's one of those JSON web things. Use is saying that this key is used to sign JWTs. Algorithm. I don't remember what that stands for. This is a random ID that I had generated for this JWKS and for this key. This is the actual key. I think it's like base 64 encoded. I forget exactly how I made it. There are guides online of how to do it. It might even be in this post. So this is the actual public certificate, which corresponds to the private certificate that CrowAuth uses to sign JWTs. And then there's this key ops verify. There's like a list of things that this could be. It's pretty much just like metadata. But that's what a JWKS looks like. Anyone can create that. So what I'm trying to offer is, like, that's a very easy thing to do on your own. So what I'm trying to offer is a way for people to, like a generic way for people to pass in authentication that doesn't have to be a specific server, right? Because I could hard code this to be CrowAuth, and then that's not very attractive for someone who has their own authentication service that uses JWTs, but they don't, they don't have my URL, so they can't. I'm not going to do that. I want this to be open. I want people to actually use it and be able to kind of tweak it to however they need. So there are a couple things that we would need. We would need, of course, the JWKS URL, and then we are also going to need the claims. I forget if I had somewhere. This is parsing. I thought I had somewhere in here where all the claims, like what all the claims look like. JSON web key. I don't know what the S stands for. Key set. Maybe that's it. JSON web key set. So I'm looking at another screen. Where was I? Oh yeah. Let's go to Jose's. I use Jose. And I really like Jose. So shout out to the dev who made that. Claim set validation. This is what we're looking for. So this is what we're looking for. So these are the claims when you do that Jose JWT verify. You can pass in an optional array of verification options where you can verify the issuer, the audience, all that kind of stuff. And depending on, so all of this, and there's some other stuff as well. Subject, type, whatever, max token age. So you can pass in optional, normally hard-coded claims to verify the JWT against. So that way, if it's just a JWT from a specific, signed by a specific certificate, you can verify that, but you can go into more detail and verify against like certain claims. So I want to allow that as well. And then if people, I imagine, if anyone's looking that deep into authentication, then they're also fine going in and changing code if they need to. So if they need, for whatever reason, some sort of dynamic claim, then they're free to go in, alter the Lambda code as needed, and they'll be off to races. Yep. So that's at least that's right now, that's where I plan for the source code to go. Let's see. So let's see. I bet I have to commit it. Oh, yeah, I do have to commit it. So I'll fill out as much of this. I probably won't be on this too much longer today. I'll probably be back. I'll probably do this kind of stuff like in the mornings. If anyone's interested in, if anyone sees this later and is interested in watching these happen live, I'm normally on, I'm in Central Time, I'm in Houston, Texas. So I'm normally online, let's say maybe like 7 to 8 my time in the morning. That'll probably be what I do. I have no schedule, so good luck with that. But I'll probably start start doing this more. I don't know exactly what's happening with Git here. I haven't ever used this flow before to change the branch name to main first. And then I think it's not letting me push because I don't have commits yet, but I'll get as far as I can with the design today and then push it. And then I'll start doing actual branches if anyone wants to follow along with like the branch history. So that's authentication. So I have actually, I've done a couple, like I said, I do try to build in public as much as I can by let me look at some stuff on this other screen. I do try to build in public as much as I can. I recently started doing these architecture posts, so I'm just looking at these real quick to see like what I might want to fill out. Let's see. I'm just copying these right now, and then I'll actually go back through and talk about them in a second. So. Authentication there. So, I wanted to use a new front end library that I've heard about before. I've been interested for a while about. I've used React. I'm pretty proficient with React. Well, I won't say pretty proficient. I'm probably at an intermediate level. I haven't really done it professionally, but I've all those applications have been React that I've shown you. So React and Next.js. I use a lot of Next.js for those, but I wanted to try something different, and I think this is a good chance to do just that because it's supposed to be a very simple application. I think what I want to do is host the presentation layer in S3 through CloudFront, and I want to use just HTML files. I don't want to generate anything with site build or anything like that. I want to, I want to use HTML. And one of the things I want to use is called Alpine Js. I heard about this not long ago, but it looks really cool. It's very lightweight JavaScript, and it just gives like very simple, very boiled down functionality that I think could probably cover most, if not all, use cases that I'll need. I'll have to actually think through them all and then check the docs to make sure I'll be able to do everything before I dive too deep into code. So that'll be part of the rest of these design streams and videos and whatnot. So we'll see what all that looks like. Like I said, I've never used it before, but I'm very curious about it. I think it could be very useful and very fun. So authorization layer, I'm going to post it in S3 CloudFront. see JS. Yeah, we'll see if just. I've been interested for a while. There's a guy I found blogs before that's like real big into vanilla JS. See if I can find him. Is it him? It might be him. No, definitely not that. Darn, I've found it before, and it's very interesting. Like his whole blog is just dedicated to vanilla JavaScript and claims that you don't need a framework or anything like that. You can just use vanilla JavaScript. I think there's a time and a place for everything. I'll say that. I think it just depends on what you're doing. So, authorization. Well, part of the data model. So, okay, let me go through everything real quick and talk about what I'm thinking, and then I'll just jot down some very rough notes and probably wrap it up for today. So, for the design, authentication and authorization, I want that to be on the forefront because that should be baked into the design, in my opinion. I've done stuff before where I like make all the entities and whatnot, and then I go back through later and try to figure out authentication and authorization. So I want to try to get on the forefront of that to start with. Authentication, I've already kind of gone over JWTs. Authorization, I think, from what I understand, from what I've read, I haven't done too much authorization. I haven't done too many, like, elsewhere did it. Had authorization, but that was about it. And I think I wasn't too far off of best practices with that. 1 second. So what I want to continue doing is something similar. I'll have pretty much each resource in the database that can be accessed by multiple people or groups. I haven't really looked into groups like from a B2B setting, like if you have a business, you want to like create a group or a team and then add everyone to that team, and then I guess on your JWT or something you would make a claim of whether or not someone is on a certain team, and then that team, anyone in that team could view the resources that are assigned, that are underneath that team, instead of like listing each individual user by like email or whatever. So I might do that. I'm interested in looking into that. Let me write that down actually. I'll just bullet point these. Oops. Into teams. Okay, I think that could be useful. That might actually, it's possible that I can add some of this functionality into Crow in the form of claims. Like I might be able to, I've thought about that in the past, and I'll have to think about it kind of like off stream, but just giving Crow, or giving users of Crow, including myself, the option to add certain claims on like an application's JWT. So the way that Crow works, let me sign into it and show you what it looks like for me. Because I have a couple applications on Crow, like I've talked about. I said, it is a little slow. So each one of these has like users, right? So Crow is actually built using Crow. I had some like weird bootstrap method, but the idea would be like have an extra field in here that's called like um, I don't know, like custom groups or teams, and then if someone is on a team, then an admin of that team would be able to add them to that team. I don't know exactly how that would work. Um, yeah, I'd have to look into that a little further to figure out exactly how it would work, but maybe. Um, More for authorization. Yeah, I think it'll just be the owners of a resource will be attached to that resource. And in this case, I think what resources are going to be for this API, each site is going to be a resource, and then, um, yeah, well, I think that's it. The data layer is going to be DynamoDB, maybe S3. And I don't think, I mean, maybe some sort of cache overlay. I don't know. We'll have to see. Data model. I'm not doing that right now. I have no idea what it's going to look like. And since I'm designing with DynamoDB, I need to figure out my access patterns before I design the data model. The API layer is going to be API gateway and / service proxy integrations. I'm thinking with SNS and or SQS for async calls. So the async calls are going to be like the actual script on someone's website that hits this API and says like, I have a new page view. That does not need to be synchronous. And it's probably going to be asynchronous from the website's view anyway. So I think it might be a configuration item. Yeah, level of maybe like let's see, like lowest middle. I don't know if you could. So what I'm saying here is the level of asynchronous absorption. So if we want like high throughput, let's say we want to get ready for, let's say someone might have a viral web page, right? Where the amount of hits goes from like 100 a minute to 10,000 a minute, right? We're going to have to scale super fast to hit that and then scale back down depending on how long the virality lasts. So that's where serverless stuff is great because I'm not going to have to worry about how we're going to scale that infrastructure. That's done all on its own. AWS gets to worry about that. What I'm trying to figure out with these like different tiers of absorption rates, if you go, I don't think this is not very good because it's not even asynchronous. It's going to hit and then do whatever it needs to do before it returns. That's not asynchronous. So I might kick that out. But the middle, what I'm trying to say is it hits SNS. So API Gateway will be directly integrated with SNS. So when a call comes in, let's say from the website to API Gateway. API Gateway is going to send it to SNS and then return, and it doesn't care about any of the execution. And then SNS is going to handle event delivery to a Lambda function, which will then transform the data if it needs to be, and then push it to DynamoDB. And anything after SNS would be asynchronous. So API Gateway hits SNS, and then it's done. That event is in the ether, and SNS can still handle the integration with Lambda and the DynamoDB. So that'd be a little bit of absorption because the calls are asynchronous, and SNS can do like batching on its own, from what I understand. So that'd be all taken care of. I don't know the scalability and the absorption potential of SNS. Definitely not compared to SQS. So SQS would buffer all that. So but SQS, in my opinion, it only really has a place in a serverless architecture if there are enough events to warrant it. So let's say you're getting 1,000 page views a day. It might warrant having SQS because there are actually going to be events that need to be pulled by Lambda. But if it's like a fairly even distribution of like traffic goes up during the day and then it comes back down, if it's smooth, if it's not jagged, then we don't really have that much to absorb. The case that where SQS, in my opinion, would be the most useful is if you think you're just going to get slammed by a bunch of traffic all at once. I think the key here is going to be to make sure that the Lambda that handles adding site hits to DynamoDB is going to have to be extremely slim. And it's going to have to be very tiny and very quick and nimble, or else this whole thing is going to get bogged down in a lot of traffic. So that guy is going to have to be big. So let me write that down actually. We don't want that. We want an accurate count. API design. Let's see entities that we're gonna have. I think it's just gonna be site, right? And so let's say, I don't know. Let's look at endpoint. Let's say we're gonna start off with nothing. There's nothing in there. What do we want to do? We're gonna want to post a site. And then I'm going to want the site's ID, how it's represented in the database. And then let's say I want to get the site. What do I want? Maybe, well, I'm going to want to pass in the site ID. And then I want to get back sites view count, other statistics. I don't know what you would edit on that, because pretty much all this is a counter, right? That's all this API really is. So I don't really know what you would put on it. It's not like there's not configuration items really for it. Maybe let's do this. Maybe emails? No. Oh yeah, maybe it should be. Yeah, okay. Well, that gets rid of, where's this? Email snapshot? Yeah. There goes that, because this is no longer a configuration item, because it can't be, right? Let's say this does become a multi-tenant solution. If I just say email snapshot for X emails, that has to be known before the infrastructure is spun up. But what's really going to happen is it's going to have to be like per site, right? So let's say it starts off as like a tiny little blog, and then it grows and it goes from one writer to 7 writers, and you want to email all 7 of those writers to site analytics, I'm not going to respin up the infrastructure. So emails are going to have to be in here. This would be the request emails to update. This one could be asynchronous. This one's synchronous. This one's synchronous because we need that ID. And then we'll have a delete site ID. Yeah, that can be async. They can just happen in the background. And then I'm going to need to. Ooh, here we go. Yeah, let's do a. Let's not forget the most important piece of functionality. This. That's what's going to actually add to the site's count. Does that make sense? Let's see. What does Google Analytics do right now? How does Google Analytics work? If you have there's analytics. So send page view. So I mean, yeah, you could send. I'm trying to think what within this what else you would post. Trying to think of like what else could be in the response or the request, sorry. I guess an email. Yeah, each one of these could have like the list of emails for the snapshot. Yeah, if you post to it, post a new email, and then you could delete an email. Huh. Like that, maybe? Would that make sense? And then you could have a delete as well. That's like this. Let's see. But then what would this be for? Maybe I wouldn't even need this. And then we'd remove it like that. I think it's, oh. Yeah. Yeah. And this would just pretty much be I could make it a set, like in DynamoDB. and in that set, you just take in the address, add it or delete it, and that's a very simple operation in DynamoDB. That could probably just be in direct integration. And then I need, if I wanted to do this email snapshot, it'd have to be some sort of cron. So this shouldn't be an option for enable. Cron. Okay. So if I just post to here, maybe post like view. I don't know if I'm getting like, I might be getting too deep into the weeds. If it should just be like, if this is a get and that just returns everything, and then the post should be like view one, view plus one, and this would be, you know, this should, email should just be in the request. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't really tell from there, from Google's API. Well, yeah, because it's a script. Hoo-hoo. I've never actually looked at this. This is huge. Where do they even send anything? Holy cow. That's a big function right there. Okay. Let's see. Down here, I'll do my presentation layer. I think that's fine. Yeah, I think that's a decent first pass for now. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the stream, and then I guess I'll see everyone in the next one. Thanks for watching.